So I'm coming up on 3 years of owning the Sony FX30 and I have loved every second of using it. Like 3 years later, and this is still my favorite camera that I've used and owned so far, which is why it might sound a little bit weird to say that I think Sony might have really messed up by making this camera. Back when the Sony FX5 was announced recently, I started seeing some conversations online of people wondering if Sony are now also eventually going to release like an FX50 or an FX30 Mark II or whatever, and if they're going to bring some of the features from the FX5 down to the APS-C line. And the more I've been thinking about it, the more I keep coming back to the same conclusion over and over again, which is that I really don't think they will, because I don't think they have any valid reason to do that right now. As I've been using my FX30 over the years since I bought it, anytime when a new camera has come out, there has never been one that I have personally looked at and thought, you know what, yeah, this seems like it does something that my FX30 doesn't do and that I really need for whatever reason. And back when it was still the first week of owning the FX30, people kept talking to me about it, and I kept telling them that I really think this is going to be the last personal camera that I'm gonna need to buy for a very, very long time. And that got me some very weird looks, and people were like, yeah, sure, whatever, you're gonna go and buy a different camera next year, but I still completely believe what I said 100%. And the reason I think that is because in the time that I've owned this camera, there has genuinely been absolutely nothing that I can complain about with it. Like, there is not a single thing that I can point at with this camera and be like, you know what, I really wish that this was different. I wish that this was just a little bit better. Like, if we're talking about image quality, I am absolutely fine with it. I'm more than fine with it. I think it is beautiful. In terms of ergonomics, I think it's perfect, at least for me. In terms of battery life, I've had no issues. And in terms of all of the features that are actually in the camera, considering the updates that it's gotten, it has all of the ones that I personally care about. The crazy thing is, with every single other camera that I've had, so if we're talking about some of my earlier cameras that were a little bit less expensive and a little bit less feature rich, there was always a point where I would feel like something was missing with them when I learned how to use them a little bit more. And it is the exact same with the bigger and much more expensive cameras that I've had the opportunity to work with as well. Like, without fail, there has always been something where I've been like, man, this is just inconvenient. You know what? It is inconvenient. I wish that this was different. I wish that this was better, and I wish that I didn't have to deal with this. But with the FX30, that has never happened to me so far. Even in that one video that I did about the FX30 long-term a while back, the only things that I could bring up that I kind of disliked, but not even really that much, were the position of the joystick and the fact that the port doors for the microphone port and the USB-C port and whatever are plastic instead of rubber. But those are such minor things that they're basically irrelevant. And that's exactly why I don't think Sony is ever going to release an FX50 or an FX30 Mark II, because they might have just made the FX30 too good. There is not a single feature, in my opinion, that is missing in terms of where this camera sits in Sony's lineup. And if they ever added anything that's a little bit more premium, like maybe open gate or one of those sensors that has a triple base ISO, which both seem to be like really popular nowadays, I think that would instantly eliminate a bunch of other Sony cameras from their lineup, and they would never get sold again. And I'm not talking about just APS-C cameras. I think that it would actually probably hit some of their full frame cameras as well. And I genuinely believe that, even though it's a little bit of a hot take. So I don't think Sony have a reason to make that camera. And I'm not complaining. I obviously love my FX30 the way that it is, but it does put you in this weird position where if you're using an FX30 and then for whatever reason, eventually you decide that you do want to upgrade, your options are to get an FX2, an FX3, maybe an FX5 or an FX6, which are all obviously great cameras on paper. But I would argue that with every single one of those cameras, even though technically they do have features that are a little bit more on the premium end, they all have trade-offs that you have to accept compared to the FX30. And in a lot of ways, at least right now, to me personally, the FX30 is actually better than those cameras. Again, I know that that is a hot take and I'm probably going to get flamed in the comments for this one, but I really believe that. That is just how it is for me. And that's why I find it strange that Sony made it the way they did, because I feel like this is a camera that is meant to just sit entirely on its own in their lineup indefinitely. And it's a little strange to think about, but it's also just a testament to how good this camera is. I'm not trying to sit here and glaze Sony throughout the entire video, and I'm not going to try to convince you that the FX30 is the definitive best camera because that's not a real thing. I'm not going to try to tell you that that's the case. But as of right now, I have yet to find a camera that makes me even consider switching away, and I'm completely happy just continuing to use the FX30 for however many more years I need to. And something else I find interesting is if you're Sony and you know that you have made a camera that is this good, where do you go from here? Like, do you just call it and accept that the FX30 is the last thing that you make in the APS-C line and then release nothing else after it? Or do you keep releasing APS-C cameras that have less features but also at a lower price so that you can target different groups of people? Or do you just bite the bullet and decide to make a successor that is as great of a value proposition as the FX30, but you know that it's going to end up killing a bunch of your other cameras in the process? I genuinely don't know how they would approach this, because with all of Sony's other cameras, there has always been this give and take that we all know about, where certain features are reserved for the higher end cameras, and then some features are more likely to be put in lower end cameras because they know that those features are not going to eat into anything else that's in their lineup. But with the FX30, it is just its own standalone thing, and it doesn't really step on the toes of any other cameras that Sony offer right now, but there's also no other camera that does what the FX30 does better than the FX30 does it. They do have some other options, but all of those will take away certain features from the FX30 to try and bring the price down. But if you want the full package, the FX30 is still your best choice. And it's just such a good future-proof option, both for people who are just now getting into videography and filmmaking and want to have room to grow with their gear. But for that same reason, it's also a great option for people who have already spent a lot of time working as videographers or filmmakers with clients who pay well, and the FX30 just hasn't given them a reason to upgrade because it is more than good enough for professional work and more than good enough to keep making the money. So yeah, I really wonder what Sony's plans are for the APS-C line in the future and what comes after the FX30, if anything, for people who can't quite afford an FX2, an FX3, an FX5, or an FX6, and this might be a little bit crazy, maybe they just don't want to get one. It's not that they can't afford it, maybe they just don't want to get one because they don't like something about them. And I'm also interested, if you own a Sony FX30, is there something that you feel like you've been missing with it or that you would like to see in a future version of it? And let's just try to keep it within reason, because I just know that somebody out there is going to leave a comment saying something like, I really want internal NDs in the FX30 Mark II. And I get it, man, I understand. I also want that, but that is not happening. So if I had to be a little bit more real with it, I would say that maybe something like a slightly higher second base ISO would be cool. So instead of 2500, maybe if it was 4000, that would be fine for me. That would be a good little quality of life upgrade. But if you have anything else, you can go ahead and drop a comment and let me know, and maybe it gives me something to think about. But yeah, the FX30 is great, and Sony might have just shot themselves in the foot with it, but that's actually good for us civilians that own one. So if you have an FX30, congratulations, you have yourself a really good camera that is probably going to serve you really well for a very long time. But yeah, I think that is about it for this one, so I'll see you in the next one.